The latest tech.
I'm Alexa. I can answer your questions.
Interviews.
And we are evolving, and we are seeing an amazing opportunity that is happening.
Accessibility.
Accessibility is one of our core values. It's even a part of our mission statement.
This is DoubleTap TV.
Welcome to another exciting edition of DoubleTap TV. Thank you guys so much for being here each and every single week. This one's going to be a fun one because we are talking about the last couple years or the last year. We're looking back at 2021 and saying, what did we do that we think was interesting? What did you guys think were interesting? And we're going to bring you some highlights from this past year on DoubleTap TV. If you want to get involved, if you want to wish us some great holiday spirit, the email address is feedback@AMI.CA. On Twitter, it is @DoubleTapCanada. Use that hashtag, which is AskDoubleTap, and we will definitely get back to you ASAP. I am Mark AFLALO with Stephen Scott by my side. Stephen, it's a great time of year to reflect on the year that was, look back at some of the really cool stories we covered, the interviews we talked about, and I guess the purpose of this show this week is to go back to the audience and say, what did you like and what had the most resonance, what resonated with our audience most, and let's bring back some highlights so that people might realize, oh, wait a second, I didn't see that, or this might have been interesting. Where do I go find that? Well, they can go to our YouTube channel and find all that information that we're going to be bringing to them this week on DoubleTap TV.
Yeah, exactly. This is in no way an opportunity not to do any actual work this week and instead, give us an opportunity just to play clips. That's not what this is about, Mark. This is about highlighting quality content. At least that's the way we're trying to sell it. No, it is. It honestly is. And it's a great opportunity to learn about some of the great stories we cover on the show. Because actually, even I, sometimes when you look back, you think, did we cover that? Wow, that was a great interview. The amount of times I have sat and watched an episode of our show and thought, that was actually pretty good. I know I shouldn't be quite so surprised at that, but honestly, it is incredible. The amount of stories, the voices, the features, the reviews, everything we do on this show. We're actually pretty good at this.
Yeah, I'll pat you on the back because I can't do it to myself. It just doesn't feel right. But the audience seems to like it, so thank you guys for giving us the kudos. And hopefully you discover something this week. Because funny enough, Stephen, as much as you joke about this being one of those episodes, we're just going to play clips. It's harder to look back at a year's worth of content and say, what do we want to talk about? What do we want to play just a couple seconds of to give people a little taste of what they might have missed so that they go back and watch some stuff? And that actually seemed a little bit harder for me to curate that kind of content than it would be to just, turn on the camera and talk about something that might be in the news.
Yeah, I'm exactly with you on that because, we looked through all the different episodes and we threw so much away that we just couldn't fit into this time frame. So we should just get on with it, Mark, because honestly, there's so much good stuff to talk about.
Well, let's start with something that's been on the topic of everybody's news feed, which is the metaverse. Mark Zuckerberg recently announced this new renaming of the Facebook brand to Meta. Obviously, this sparked conversation about what the metaverse is. And really, when you think back to this concept of virtual reality, augmented reality, this online universe where we're interacting with people, you have to think back to a company like Microsoft, who introduced the HoloLens many years ago. They're on their second generation, I believe, of HoloLens, it's HoloLens 2, and they've been working on technology that they call mesh, that really is what Mark Zuckerberg was talking about. It's something that Satya Nadella even reiterated in a Microsoft keynote event a couple days later after Zuckerberg was there. But we had a chance, actually, you had a chance to have a great sit down with Greg Sullivan, who is the head of HoloLens at Microsoft.
Yeah, it was great to sit down with Greg, and we actually had quite a bit of time with him to be able to talk about this in real detail, which I'm so pleased about, and we got some great content for our show. I want to take you back to that conversation now, Mark, where I asked him specifically the question, what is Microsoft Mesh? What does it mean?
HoloLens is it's a computer. It's a Windows 10 computer that you wear on your head. And what it does is it projects holograms into the world around you, three-dimensional digital objects that you can interact with. With HoloLens 2 that we launched in late 2019, we really extended that idea of this device that could project holograms in front of you and let you interact with them to connect it to the cloud. And we knew that, for example, this HoloLens is a powerful computer, but it is a mobile device. It has essentially a smartphone chipset in it. And so the graphics power of this device is about the same as your smartphone. But what if I ask this device to render a 100 million polygon CAD file of a truck engine or a spaceship. The graphics power of this device means that it would take a long time to actually render that complicated graphic. So what we did with the introduction of HoloLens 2, we introduced a bunch of cloud services, including Azure Remote Rendering, that can take that complicated computational graphics file, render the image in the cloud with all of the vast GPU resources that we have in the compute resources in the cloud, and then send the resulting image file down to this device that can display it and manipulate it without having to render it. So that was what we did with HoloLens 2. And then it set us up for Ignite announcement that you referred to, is we connect a bunch of these pieces. You have a device that can mix realities in your world. You have a cloud service that can enable us to share and collaborate in these experiences. We can fix the location of a hologram. I can place a hologram here in my home, and you could collaborate and interact with it from where you're sitting, halfway across the world. So this what Mesh does is it's a platform for immersive shared experiences.
Greg Sullivan, the director of HoloLens over at Microsoft, just one of the highlights from this past year on DoubleTap TV. We've got way more coming up after we take a quick break, including a town hall that we did that really kind of resonates with us, and our audience just ate up. It is DoubleTap TV. He is Stephen Scott. I am Mark AFLALO. We'll be back in just a moment.
For more great DoubleTap TV content, visit AMI.CA/DoubleTap. This is DoubleTap TV.
We are back on DoubleTap TV talking all things the best of 2021 on this show, DoubleTap TV, because you guys email us at feedback@AMI.CA all the time, telling us what you like, what you don't like. We'll stick to things that you like. And of course, you reach out on Twitter at DoubleTap Canada with the hashtag, which is #DoubleTap.
And, we get so much feedback that way, which is absolutely brilliant. And it's always great to learn what our viewers enjoy. But Mark, I know that this time round, when we were looking at these clips, there was one particular episode that really was the one that you wanted to highlight, an episode I know you, like I did, loved.
Definitely, and that was the episode where we talked about creating music. And we had two guests on for this show. It was a two-part, the first time we did a two-part here at DoubleTap TV. And we had a chance to catch up and meet a new gentleman, Rob Arbitier, who is a self-proclaimed entrepreneur. He's a music technologist, but most importantly, he got his start in one of the most creative ways I've ever heard of in my life. I don't think it would happen today. And that is with an artist that we are all familiar with, and that is Stevie Wonder.
The way I usually describe it is my life has always been half music and half technology. So I started on classical piano when I was 3 years old, and I have a whole history in music, and I love music, but I also, around age 9 or 10, fell in love with electronics and built my first computer and all that kind of stuff, and totally love that world. So my career has always been back and forth between music and technology. A lot of times it was guided by which was paying better. My big leap with Stevie was that he had sort of abandoned the band I was working with to go on tour. And that's when I wrote him this sequencer called S, very clever name. It's called S for sequencer. And what I did is I bought him a computer with the last of the credit on my credit card. And I found out where he was going to be staying, which was the Plaza in New York. He was at Madison Square Garden, I think. And I just said, hey, Stevie, I'm Rob. I'm in that band Mix that you're going to be producing. And I've got something here that I think you're going to love. And I need to show it to you now because I have no money left whatsoever. I spent it all to bring this to you. And so if you like this, I need you to buy it from me tonight, because I'm completely broke and we can get on with things. And if you don't like it, then I'm giving up on the music business and I'm going back down to Philly, which is where I was from. And I'm just moving back in with my parents. And that's the end of this. Because at this point, it had already been about 9 months since I'd moved to LA to work with him. And then he left on tour. So he said, well, let me see what you got. And so I went in to his room with him. And I had never seen a suite like that at the Plaza before. I mean, it was like 10 times bigger than the apartment I was living in. But I set up the keyboard, he had keyboards there. I set up the computer on his dining room table, and I showed it to him, and he just completely lost his mind. He loved it. We ended up staying up the whole rest of the night, and I was actually making software updates for him while he was playing with it.
Also on that show, as I alluded to off the top, not only Rob Arbertier, but Ed Gray, the director of accessibility at a company called Avid. Avid is known for making incredible music creation tools like Pro Tools. And Ed actually lost his sight while at the company. It wasn't Avid at the time. It was called DigiDesign, but he talks to us about accessibility at Avid and how it evolved.
You know, there was definitely an interest in supporting blind users. And I'll just say, you know, one of my world observations is that oftentimes something's not that important until it happens to you. You don't necessarily have the luxury of building a department, so you have to take the accessibility support wherever you can get it. And usually there are employees who, like me, have lost vision, or they have a relative that's lost vision, or they've had an accident, or they have a temporary loss of vision. Very important that a lot of disabilities are temporary. And you have to build a coalition and have some objectives, some kind of, in Avid's case, quarterly objectives, just to keep the program vibrant. And you have to get some outside help where you need it, because what I think happens, and this is like kind of the stuff of notes I've written recently, is you have a spasm of enthusiasm for an accessibility program. You do some development, and then some other Mondo project comes along and people are pulled off it, and it just kind of languishes. And if you don't, have this commitment at all these levels, product marketing and testing and customer support and the sales and like the web properties, it can die on the vine. It can really suffer, and then you have to pick it back up again. And that in fact happened with Avid. It kind of was dormant for a while, and then we picked it back up.
Great conversation with Ed and Rob. Honestly, go back and watch those episodes on AMI.CA/DoubleTap, or find our DoubleTap TV content on YouTube or in the AMI app if you're in Canada. Mark, I want to talk about town halls because, in our sort of structure of the way we do the show, we tend to not forget the town halls, but of course they are added extras that the audience gets every year. So tell us about the town hall format and what it meant this year in the virtual sense.
Well, virtual was a bit more difficult because we wanted to do this in front of a live audience. We wanted to have people physically there and interact with them and talk to them about get the pulse of the people. We didn't have that opportunity, so what we did instead is we actually polled the audience and said, what do you want us to talk about? Give us a couple topics. We gave them about 10 different topics. And one of them was this whole creator environment that we live in nowadays with, people on YouTube and people, creating content and actually making money and making a living off the content. And one of the people that we had a chance to get on one of our town halls, which is one of the most memorable that I had, was Molly Burke. Not only an incredible young woman, but she's Canadian, and she actually found YouTube because of her blindness. And she talked to us about gravitating towards YouTube.
When I lost the majority of my vision at 14 to retinitis pigmentosa, I also lost all of my friends, and I'm a very bubbly, outgoing, extroverted person, so losing my group of friends was really difficult for me. And not only did I lose them as friends, but I started being bullied by them. So it was a really, really rough time. I struggled a lot with situational depression and just felt very isolated and alone. And I no longer had girls to go shopping with on the weekends or have sleepovers with, and that's kind of when I found the internet. It was around 2008, 2009. So right as YouTube and social media in general was starting to get a bit more traction, and I really at first found like cat videos, as we all do, and like YouTube music covers because I love to sing, so I'd watch singing covers. And then slowly I just kind of found more and more and more to YouTube, and I found the beauty and lifestyle community. And for me at that time, I've always loved makeup, I've always loved fashion, and at the age 14, 15, that's really when you're kind of starting to define your own style and make your own choices, and you're starting to play with makeup more and all of these things. And so as I started wanting to do those things but didn't have friends to do it with, I found these girls on YouTube, and they were all around my age, 13, 14, 15, talking about the things that I was interested in, doing 5 lipsticks from MAC Cosmetics that are great for fair skin, or all these different things that were perfect for me because I couldn't go to MAC and swatch lipstick on my skin tone anymore. I didn't see it. I couldn't, go shopping and look in the store windows at mannequins to see what was cool. So I would listen to these girls talk about it, and they felt like my friends. They felt like my big sister.
Again, another episode to go back and watch, a fantastic hour-long episode of Double Tap TV, our Town Hall special with Molly Burke. Check it out. It's called Influencers, if you want to find it on YouTube or find it on Double Tap on AMI.CA/DoubleTap or through the app as well, the AMI app, which you can now get on Android as well as iPhones. So well worth checking out. Mark, more to come.
Oh, definitely more to come. There was one episode that you brought up when we were talking about this, that you said, Mark, we have to talk about this company, because that was an incredible episode. There was so much learning to be had, and it's one that I felt really close to. So let's take a quick break. It is Double Tap TV with Stephen Scott and Mark AFLALO. When we come back, a very cool company from Boston that is changing the way people use their voice.
For more great Double Tap TV content, visit AMI.CA/DoubleTap. This is Double Tap TV.
We are back on Double Tap TV talking all things the best of 2021, which for us means like 2 seasons kind of overlapping there. Thank you guys for getting involved. Let us know what you like. I'm curious, more specifically, to know what you've learned from this episode and what you might have gone back and listened to again or watched again. Do let us know. The email address is feedback@ami.ca, or reach out on Twitter. It is @DoubleTapCanada with the hashtag, which is AskDoubleTap. So when we were planning for this episode, there's one interview and one episode that I actually totally forgot about. And Stephen reminded me that we had a chance to catch up with a very, very cool woman. Her name is Rupal Patel. She is the founder and CEO of a Boston-based company named Vocal ID.
And this takes us into an interesting area, doesn't it? Because we're moving away from the traditional conversation we have on Double Tap TV around technology for people who are blind, but actually looking beyond that now and looking at the wider community of disabled people, which I thought was really important. And it was great to hear Rupal talk to us about how Vocal ID started.
I was at a conference and I was presenting some of my early work for my PhD, which was showing that people with severe speech disorder, let's say someone with cerebral palsy or other conditions, still had the ability to control some aspects of their voice. So they could still control, let's say, the pitch of their voice or the loudness of their voice. This is called prosody. And literally after sort of giving this talk about the fact that there's preserved vocal quality in their speech, I walk into the exhibit hall of this conference where I see different people using different kinds of assistive technologies, and the same voice is being heard around, like everywhere around me. And then the point I noticed most was this young girl and this grown man using different devices, but the exact same voice. So to me, that was the spark of how do we, if there truly is signal in their voice that's uniquely theirs, how do we use that? How do we harness that to make a voice that's, from their device that sounds like it could belong to them? And that was the beginning of the research. And so that seed was planted. And for many years, we were trying to crack that nut. Like, how do you, in fact, build a synthetic voice, which requires hours of recording, which obviously someone who can't speak can't do. And even if they can do, it's not going to sound clear. So the idea was then to borrow the voice samples of someone who could speak, who was similar to them in age and gender and so on. And so this is the work that we were doing in my lab for a few years, about 5 years actually, funded by the National Science Foundation here in the US. That was the beginning of the science idea.
That is founder and CEO of Vocal ID, Rupal Patel. She also talked to us about what it takes to make technology like this come to market and how many people are involved.
I think I was thinking a lot around, well, how do we build this and how do you scale it? So I had a chance to talk about the science behind the technology at TED Women in 2013. It was December 2013. And during that time, what we saw is right after the talk, I had this call to action in the talk, which said, well, what if you could donate your voice to someone in need? And we really thought a few hundred people may sign up, because at that time we needed about 7 to 10 hours of someone reading in order for us to then build a synthetic voice. And we got lots of volunteers. We got thousands of volunteers. So that was the second real inflection point to say, oh, if we have that many volunteers who are willing to contribute their voice, maybe we can do this for more than the handful of people we could build a voice for in the lab. So in the lab, it was a research project. And then when we pulled it out, this could actually be used for people who needed a voice to speak. it really took about a decade of the scientific discovery piece of it, because it's actually a very difficult problem scientifically to kind of decouple. So you think about it very simply. You have an egg, a brown egg and a white egg. What you want to do is from the brown egg, just get the yolk, and from the white egg, just get the white part, right? And you want to recombine it. That's actually what we're doing in this digital world. We're saying we want just some aspects of the person who can't speak, not the stuff that makes their speech unclear, but the part that is about who they are, their identity. And then we have to borrow the voice quality and the characteristics of actually producing consonants and vowels for someone who's similar to them. And then we recombine them together and create this sort of morphed egg.
That's Rupal Patel talking there from Vocal ID. Again, another great episode to check out, as are all our episodes of Double Tap TV. You can get them, as I was mentioning earlier, on the AMI app, on Double Tap, on YouTube, and you can also find us on AMI.CA/DoubleTap. Well worth checking out all these episodes. I can't believe we're in a 4th season here, Mark, and we're talking about all these tons of episodes that are there. There's so much to go back and watch and enjoy.
Stephen, we're just scraping the surface when it comes to the amount of guests we've had on, the amount of topics we've discussed on Double Tap TV.
Tons.
So do check it out. As Stephen mentioned, lots of ways to find us. If you want to email us something directly, by all means. It's feedback@ami.ca. Reach out anytime you've got an idea, anytime you've got something to tell us. We welcome that feedback. And of course, on Twitter, it is @DoubleTapCanada with the hashtag, which is AskDoubleTap. On behalf of all these previous guests in the past couple of years, and Stephen Scott, I am Mark AFLALO. Thank you for being with us. We'll catch you again on our next edition of Double Tap TV.
Hosted by Mark AFLALO and Stephen Scott. Editing Jordan Steves and Mark AFLALO. Voiceover Anna Vocino. Integrated Described Video Specialist Ron Rickford. Coordinating Producer Jennifer Johnson. Director Production Kara Nye. Director Programming Brian Perdue. VP Content Development and Programming John Melville. President and CEO David Errington. Copyright 2021 Accessible Media Inc.